Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. It's me, Tigria Gardenia. This is such a good episode. Such a good episode. Such a good episode. Can you hear my enthusiasm? Julie Brams is going to blow your mind. Like, if you've ever wondered about terms like ecopsychology and forest therapy and why neuropsychology and why any of this stuff has anything to do with the earth, with plants, with the natural world, then this is the episode for you. We got into such a great discussion that really helps kind of put a vocabulary around many of the things that we feel, both what we feel like we're missing when it comes to our inherent disconnection, as well as where we want to go as a collective, and the fact that we really, as beings of nature, are never, ever alone. There is so much I could tell you about this, but really, I'm just going to let the conversation speak to itself, speak for itself, better said. And so, with that, I'm going to leave you to episode 114, Healing the Original Trauma, Disconnection with Julie Brams. Welcome to Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. I'm your host, Tigria Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor, certified life coach, and the founder of the Naturally Conscious community. For over a decade, I've been known as a world ambassador for plant advocacy, working closely with plants to share their practical wisdom to help you consciously embody the elements of life that nourish your evolution. In this podcast, I delve into ancient and modern knowledge from biology to spirituality about the wondrous ways of plants. Together, we'll explore how ecosystem thinking helps you overcome limiting beliefs, understand the true nature of relationships, and live an authentic, impactful life. Julie, I am so excited to have this conversation. I have been waiting. As a matter of fact, it's really funny because I've been kind of traveling in these days, and I kept looking at my calendar, going, "When is my meeting with her? Like, when is this going to be this interview?" Because I was so looking forward to all these different pieces that you're working on. But before we get into all of the details, which I've got tons of questions already prepared, tell everybody, like, who is Julie Brams?
Okay. Well, I think primarily I'm a mental health professional. I've been a mental health professional for over 30 years. And, my career led me into social activism, you know. And when I was really, when I came into the field, I was have a deep, deep love for our earth and a real fascination with human consciousness. And, so my career was really formed with those foundations of wanting to really understand, what causes human beings to suffer and what relieves that suffering, and how can we as human beings coexist on this planet, live in earth respectfully, responsibly, joyfully. I kind of never gave up on this idea that I don't think humans are supposed to be this destructive. I really, like, forever was like, I don't think that's right. I think something's wrong. And so I kind of had that passion in me to try to figure that out. And, somewhere along the way, it just kind of like this, duh, we have a really distorted core premise that humans are separate from nature, superior to nature, are supposed to, like, sometimes it's like be the shepherds of or caretake, but mostly it's presented as dominate,
Yep.
to take what we need, and the planet is here for our well-being. It's very human centric. And we know that not all cultures believe this. That's very much a Western civilization kind of premise. And it's not only untrue, but it's delusional. So as a mental health professional, I'm like, wait a second. Like, how can we keep treating all of these things, anxiety, depression, addiction, all of the things that really, really hurt human beings, without addressing this core faulty belief?
Mhm.
So I know there is kind of like a side field, I would say, called ecopsychology. Many people know of it. It's been around for decades. But again, as a professional that's also been involved for decades, it never comes into the mainstream.
Mhm.
And that again was very shocking to me. How is this like this subfield when it's really pointing to a foundational cognitive distortion? So, um, the other thing that occurred to me was, okay, you can understand that, but how do you treat it? What
Mhm.
would be the, quote unquote medicine for that? And so I also started this campaign to find something that was reliable, standardized, repeatable, because although I'm in a soft science, it's a science, and
Mhm.
I don't personally feel comfortable making things up. And I don't mean that in a negative way, because obviously the people that came before me were mavericks and they were like, yes, they also noticed what I noticed. And they set out to create ways to heal people. Joanna Macy is one of the
Mhm.
most foundational people in this field. But I personally was like, I don't feel that. I don't have that maverickness in me. I have more like, show me what it is, and then I'll do what I can do. So it led me to a practice that a man named Amos Clifford developed. Yeah, through and his company, or his, yeah, I guess it's a company, the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy.
I was just looking through the latest email that came through my inbox like 3 minutes before we started.
Yeah, and when I found his work, what he had created based on his life experience, he combined it with Shinrin-Yoku, which is a Japanese practice that
Mhm.
people are starting to know about, which translates in English to forest bathing, which is bathing in the atmosphere of the forest, not water, but in the atmosphere.
Mm.
Um, and his work as a therapist and a Zen Buddhist and wilderness tracking, and he pulled all these things together, and it's amazing where it is now. I was trained as cohort 16, and I think now
Wow.
now they've left the numbers behind.
Yeah, there are names now.
Yeah, but I was, not the very beginning, but pretty new. And now, like, where they are is just incredible. So
Yep.
anyway, once I had this how, I thought, oh, okay, I can bring this back to my profession and say it's not only that we have to figure out how to change this thought, but that there is already an established practice of how to allow humans and nature to repair their relationship by being together. You know, that it's, again, it's decentering the human and centering Earth. So I kind of took it upon myself to rename what I'm doing to Earth centered psychology, because I felt like that's really a more um, understandable title. Because when I would say to people eco psychology, they would go, oh, yeah, recycling. I'm like, no,
That's fantastic.
not about recycling. And I was just like, whew, okay, this is not landing anywhere near
No.
the target. So when I started to say earth centered psychology, people were like, at least they're like, oh, what is that? It's like
Exactly.
there is this. innate longing, I think, that we have to be connected with the other than human beings in a way that I still believe is deeply ingrained in each of us, that we long for it. There's another man, Clemens Arve, and he wrote
Mhm.
a book, Biophilia.
Yeah, biophilic effect. I have it
Yeah,
in Italian. It was gifted to me. I'm just looking up because that's where it is.
yeah. And he talks about that, this biophilia that we have as human beings, a hardwired love of
Mhm.
the other than humans. We're just, and again, I want to specify, like, Western culture has been cut from that hardwiring, although we can't be, but mentally
Hence our
cut.
problems.
Yeah,
Hence our problems because
yeah,
we can't be, but we are.
right. It's psychological problem.
Exactly.
Right? And so we're cut from that and then shamed. And of course, there was that point in history, you know, Byzantine Empire, where there were anti pagan laws.
Mhm.
If you felt you were part of nature or you felt that nature was sentient, you would be killed. So, not just shamed, which we do now, like, oh, what are you, a tree hugger? Like, there's a lot of shaming towards anyone who dares to remember
Right.
their relationship. So, anyway, that's a long answer of
No, it's
where
great.
am I?
I'm glad that you touched on all these elements because
Yeah.
so I as a instead of as a coach and mentor, I'm very careful with my clients to sort of I don't want to say differentiate because that's not the right word, but to complement, for example, the psychological side. In other words, I'm not a therapist in that way, and I'm very open with my clients. Many of my clients, for different reasons, work with psychologists or different kinds of therapists, and I love it because we often work together. We work in tandem, and each one of us with our own piece of the different puzzle, and I love it when I do have the opportunity, which unfortunately is rarer than I wish, to also that my client is working with a therapist, a psychologist who has that kind of background, that nature inspired background, because I think it really does inform. It makes the kind of flow between us, the looking at the past and the future, the cognitive side versus the behavioral, like all these different elements flow so much more
Yeah.
because we all kind of have a systems approach at that point. So we're looking at this as, okay, you're in the middle of an ecosystem. You have some elements that are being worked on in this side of the ecosystem and others in this side of the ecosystem, but it's all still one system and we have to work together. And I think that that's such an important aspect of this type of work. Um, and so I'm glad that you sort of brought a little bit also the history to it, because I do think that there is still a lack of understanding around the whole concept of ecopsychology. Even myself, I've been a part of several, like I said, I'm not a therapist, but I've been inside of different groups that are eco-psychology. And even within them, there's this weird variation. And like some, it's just, oh, I do psychology in nature. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right to me. Like,
Exactly.
no offense to you, but that just doesn't sound, that's not enough. Like, thank you, but not, no. So,
Exactly.
and we have these conversations and it's really interesting about it. You touched on something that I'd love to kind of unpack if you're willing to go there with me a little bit, which is I was just I was actually interviewed for a different podcast today, and at the very end, she asked one of those types of questions like, "What's that one message that you want to
Mm.
leave? The one thing that has become clear to you in working with plants?" And I said, "Oh, that's super easy. 3 words: I am nature." And and that's it. Like, that's the resounding message: is there is no difference between myself and the swallows that are up in the air, to the plants that are sitting in my house, to Gary the silver fern that's right outside my window. Like, we are all beings of this earth, and we live in relationship and harmony to it. I'd love for you to kind of help us understand. I'm going to try to word the question correctly, which is, where does the psychology of it, in the sense of where would you recommend? I guess maybe that's a good place to start. Where would you recommend somebody to come into it from a psychology perspective? Is it more of a where it is that you are finding that people are experiencing the most amount of hardship, such as anxiety, like you said, in all these pieces? And where does that kind of nature inspired or earth inspired, in your case, the way that you word it, which I think is such a beautiful terminology, where does that fit into the work? How do you bring it into the work?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and it's not exactly simple. This is
No.
why I wrote the book, because let me try to answer the question, because a lot of things are coming up for me.
Mhm.
Um, One of the things is that, uh, yeah, I wrote the book because I was speaking to a lot of therapists who wanted to be nature informed, let's say,
Mhm.
but they still held themselves as the therapist.
Mhm.
They were still in a construct of domination where they use therapy to help them help the person. Right? So that's what you were talking about. I do therapy in nature. Yeah, that's not it at all.
No.
You can do that, but that's not the repair. That
Right.
is just continuing with a little extra tool in your toolkit, which I don't like because, again, right, it's fundamentally opposed to respecting other than human beings as their
Mhm.
own sovereign being rather than a tool in your toolkit.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I spend a lot of time really trying to, what I recommend to a therapist is that they become a guide, and that they actually do go through ANFT's course. I know that sounds really prescriptive, and people are like, why are you saying them? And it's true, there are an awful lot of other nature therapy organizations that can train you to be a guide. Great. But I know Amos's work, and I've been through the training, and it's I know the design. I know how it works. I know that it works. And one of the first things it does is it allows the guide to unlearn that they're not the center. They're not where the healing takes place. They are there to open the doors. Like Amos's tagline is, the guide opens the doors, the forest is the medicine. So
Mhm.
you're connecting people to repair their relationship with all the other than human beings. You're not doing therapy on them.
Right.
And so this idea of, what do you do when someone's anxious? It's like, yes, we do all the things we do when someone's anxious, but this is getting at what I believe, and not just me, obviously, right? But I'm saying underneath it is this core, like, corrupted belief that's at the root of the anxiety and the depression and the whatever. So it's not, you can't skip that step. Like, you must go outside of yourself as the therapist, lead your people to their relationship, like we talked about, a system, an ecosystem. And from my licensure as a marriage and family therapist, it's a family system.
Mhm.
So it's like you've got all these family members out there that you never speak to, you never look at, you walk past, maybe you pick because, oh, I love it, I'm bringing it inside. Like, it's so weird. Like, if you treated other people like that, which some people do treat other people like that, and it's outrageous. Um, so the therapist, let's say, if you are a mental health professional, you have to work hard to get out of your role. Most forest therapy guides are not therapists, they're guides. There are people who have trained to understand how to let the other than humans take the lead in rebuilding your relationship, your kinship with them. Even some guides can't get to that because we are so narcissistic as a species. We think that everything, make or break is all on a human being. And it's like, are you kidding me? We haven't been here long enough to think we know all the answers. So please learn how to listen to a rock
Mhm.
or a stream or trees, and again, it's like breaking through this, some of the conditioning that we have, mental, psychological conditioning to think, I can't do that, or to
Right.
think that's crazy, or to think, because it goes back to that core wound, of, yeah, if you practice this, you're going to be executed. So anyway, not to get too dramatic, but
No, no, but I think that's a great way of putting it. I oftentimes with my own clients talk about, or, I describe my work as using, not the right word. That's not where I wanted to start.
yeah,
Working with plants to step out of the human mind and into the plant mind. In other words, going into plantness, because to a certain extent, plants are our world. So it's safe. It's a safe way of like stepping outside of the confines of the rigid rules that we've been taught and stepping into the plant mind in order to then flip around and come back into the human mind, but from a different perspective. And I think the hardest part that I see that even worked, even I experienced it pretty deeply was we are to a certain extent, taught from when we're very little, use your words, right? Use your words. But so much of this is not about using your words. It's about getting out of the words because the words have been corrupted for a while. So you kind of have to step out of the words to go back into the feelings that we no longer trust, right? To experience that profound silence that you experience in, which is of course not quiet, it's a different thing, that you experience in the natural world and with natural beings of whatever type, whether that's again sitting outside and listening. I have a beautiful display of acrobatics by swallows happening outside my window, and swallows are relatively quiet compared to many other types of birds. But there's wind, there's all these different things. When we finish here, I'm definitely going to be sitting on the patio, just watching and experiencing and allowing that to speak to me in a way that is outside of the way the human mind works. That is the interaction with Gary, the silver fir, and these swallows who meet every single year, because every year I get to experience this and feel that relationship, feel what that is, to then come back into my own human relationships and give that space for that silence and for that feeling of things. And then so that when I do relearn my words, they no longer have those connotations that they used to have. And I think for a lot of people, that silence is extremely uncomfortable. And especially in a therapy space where we're conditioned against to sit on the couch, tell me what you're feeling, talk through all your emotions, which talk therapy has its merits, but but there's more, and your body has a lot of knowledge, of that residual knowledge that you just talked about, right? The fact that I am nature and I'm connected to nature, and therefore my body knows a lot more than my human mind knows. And so I completely understand what you're saying, which is, we need to have more of these spaces where, like you said, you can listen, quote unquote, with a whole body, full senses, full perception, listen to the rock, listen to the stream, and feel what that is, and be okay in the lack of words.
exactly. I think you just hit it perfectly. It's embodied, so where it's true, like our language matters. Talk about that too, like changing some of the language to help us align better. Like instead of saying, me in nature, it's me as nature with the
Mhm.
rest of nature begins to reshape our thinking. But
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. It's not about thinking, it's about being embodied in our earth body. Our body is still connected to the earth. Whether our mind is or not, our body is going to feel what's happening to us as earth. um, which again is where I think the disruptions come, because our
Right.
bodies are suffering as our earth is suffering. Our bodies, because like you said, we are earth, suffers too. It can't be
Mhm.
outside. As much as we think our body is never going to be outside of the rest of nature or outside of earth.
Right.
um, Sometimes when I'm talking, if let's say it's indoors, and I'll ask people, are we in nature? And most often,
The
people will
answer.
say no. And I'm like, but you're in your body. You are always in nature. You
Right.
are nature. You can't ever be outside of nature. As humans, right? Like you said, we're taught to overthink or to value thinking over sensation.
Mhm.
This is part of where like Vipassana meditation kind of informs one's ability to be embodied. So I think that's also a great foundational skill, to know the difference between thinking and sensing. In ANFT style forest therapy, one of the first invitations is tuning into your senses, at least the five. Like there are so many more, but
Right.
what does this place sound like? What does this place smell like? Is that pleasurable? Like reconnecting us, because again, we've been through different, um, what do you call it? Like different, I'm just going to say politics.
Mhm.
We've been shamed out of our bodies.
Right.
Bodies are sinful, especially female bodies. So all of that has to be unlearned as well, that we can love being embodied again, whatever our body's condition is in. Even if parts of it aren't working the way we would like, or
Right.
we're missing a part of it, or whatever it is, to experience life through sensation, at least as a choice. It's not about not thinking. That's not possible. That's not recommended, you know. But we want to know the difference between, this is me thinking about something and this is me sensing that thing. Like you're saying, listening to a stream or a water source is going to be a sensory listening. Of course, you have hearing, you'll hear it, but it's full body listening.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up that whole the understanding of the senses, because I think that that's another piece that science is slowly catching up on. As you were saying earlier, how, of course, there's some things that you want them to be grounded in some form of methodology and understanding. I have the benefit of being a little bit more free in that, being that I live in one of the world's largest spiritual communities, and, I work on the confines of that. But I'm also a pretty grounded in science type of person. And actually, right now, I just the other day was teaching a lesson for the Dam and Her Alchemy School, and the lesson was on recovering lost senses. And it was really taking the approach of, besides the fact that the five senses that we have, if we look at them again through the plant lens and we understand how plants experience, the sense of sight, or the sense of hearing, or the sense of taste, is so much more expansive than what we humans currently live. I mean, we really narrow the band down on so many aspects. And one of the things I've loved about every kind of forest therapy and forest bathing experience that I've ever had is that and as well as what I teach when I take people out to communication with the plant world, because it's very, very similar. It's a slightly different variation of the same thing. And it's this concept of in that natural setting where, again, my body starts to resonate with my true essence, right? With the fact that I am earthbound, I am part of this nature natural environment. So it's almost like I can shut off some of those constraints inside of this forest environment. And then in each one of these invitations and the way that I'm brought into contact allows me to, when I sit by the stream and I quote unquote hear, I'm not just hearing the same way as I would hear, I don't know, as I'm walking through a city where I'm actually shutting down a lot of aspects of my hearing because, the noise, because of this, because I don't want to eavesdrop on people's conversations, because I'm lost in this, blah, blah. It's the opposite. It's okay, let's assume that I had full range of my hearing as a being of nature. And then from there, where does my body lead me to naturally, quote unquote, listen to? So my hearing is completely amplified and my listening is specified. So so it's a conscious choice. It's a conscious awareness and a conscious presence that brings us back into this different level of contact. And in this lesson that I teach about, the lost senses, I start with this 5, and I even have like a little meditation spirit series up on Insight Timer and also inside the Naturally Conscious community, and then go the step beyond, which is like, hey, there's another 15 senses that plants
Right.
have that, most likely we also have them. And so how about experimenting a little bit with, these other types of, not just, for example, vision, which is pretty much the idea of photoreception and phototropism, but what about heliotropism? Like just the connection to sunlight and all of what sunlight involves. Like we can just slightly start advancing our awareness and reach some super cool things. Like I did a whole episode for the podcast about scototropism, which is the sense of darkness, the idea of I grow and I have a relationship with the dark, not absence of light. Like I'm not avoiding light. I am literally moving towards the darkness, because there are some plants like Monstera that really love darkness for a period of their lives. And it's like, oh, use that for shadow work. Like it's a whole other opposite. Like it's a completely different idea when we start to recognize these parts of ourselves.
Right. And so, like, what you're describing is these plants operating as your therapist,
Right.
so to speak, right? So, this is what is the difference between a guide, let's say, and a human therapist. The guide would, like you are doing, connecting people with another than human being to let it inform you of how to navigate this place
Mm,
in the best sense, you know. And like you're saying, it's a fact, we co-evolved with plants. Of course we have those abilities, we have been trained away, and we suffer.
right.
And I also want to keep underscoring, I really believe they suffer without us.
Hmm.
So it's not just like, because a lot of people at this point I hear, it's like, oh, if the humans are gone, it'll be better, you know? And it's like, that's again so narcissistic.
Right.
You know, it's like, just take your place in the system. You know,
Right.
you grew here for a reason. I don't think we have to get rid of human beings. It's also it's kind of like a tell at how scary and hard it is for a human being to imagine changing their way of being, changing their lifestyle. It's like, I'd rather kill us all off than let us remember how to reconnect. Like, really?
I,
Because it's a lot more
I am
fun to reconnect.
I am so glad you said that, because I've been trying to find the right words for exactly what you just expressed. And I hadn't thought about it in those exact terms. And I love the way you just described that, because I also see it as a sort of cowardly act to a certain extent. I think I see it in two different ways. I see it, one, as cowardly, cowardly, and I get that most of us don't have a frame of reference to be able to do it, but it is kind of cowardly. It's like, hey, it's too much work for us to reconnect, so screw it. We should just leave the planet and be done with it and like let nature take over. I'm like, you do realize that nature is just going to create another version of us because nature does that, right? They're going to we've had the same species evolve in different locations in the planet for a reason. Like there are characteristics that we have as beings of nature that are necessary for the order of the world. Like, yes, we've gone out of control. We're a little rogue. We make a bunch of mistakes. We screw up, but we're also super young. We're like
Yeah.
babies in this ecosystem. We're like 200,000 years old as a species. So, I mean, nature kind of cuts us a break too, because if not, they would kick us all off already. They're
Right.
like, let's give you another chance to kind of evolve into who you should be. So, one aspect of it is I do think it's really cowardly. And I do think it is, and this is why I do like working especially with, like I said, a trained therapist, because I don't do trauma work and those types of specifications. Like I just don't have that training, and I respect the person who has learned how to navigate certain types of these things. So I know my limitations and have no problems with telling a client, all right, we've reached a place where either you choose to work with a therapist in addition, with me, but also, or you just choose to work with a therapist for a while and then we'll come back when you're in a different place. But I do think that because I do think that the biggest piece that's inhibiting us is a massive amount of fear. Like
Mhm.
so much of this arrogance that we see comes from this fear of the unknown. It's like we've forgotten so much what
Mhm.
it feels like to be in this union and this connection, to be able to be. We've forgotten that also, if you look at any plant, you can see two trees right next to one another. And they are completely different. Like if you
Mm.
really look at it, even if kin are the same species, they are completely different. And so there is this I am interrelated and yet independent. And we keep thinking, oh, if I reconnect, that means I lose all of whomever I am. And it's like, no, you just gain
Right.
all this other stuff. So I'm so curious as to how do you, I don't know if the right word is treat, deal with, help, support the innate fear that I think holds back so many people from truly allowing themselves to reconnect. The fear that they've screwed up with nature for so long and, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? The fear that I don't know how to act. What can I eat? What can I buy? What am I allowed to wear? How do I do all these things? Like, how
Right.
do you see that a more eco earth-based approach to psychology could really help people with that deep innate fear of connection, especially if there's any kind of trauma that's experienced in their life?
Right. Right. That's a really good question. And I kind of want to go in two directions with it. So, one answer is, how do you deal with the fear of reconnecting is to really amplify or emphasize that this is fun. Reconnecting is playful, it's
Mhm.
enjoyable, it's something you did as a child, it's the way we all start. So it's nothing that you haven't done before. It's something that you loved to do when you were a toddler or younger, you know? It's a natural way. And it's, again, it's fun, it's playful. There's nothing scary about it. The other thing I think is doing this in a supported container, like what
Mm.
you're doing, or like what ANFT style does, is it's a container where you are with other people and you're held. Your guide is holding you. If traumatic material comes up, there's a way to deal with it. I feel very comfortable with that because I am trained as a mental health
Sure.
professional. So that hasn't been like an edge that I've had to learn. Um, but like you said, if something comes up and it's beyond your scope, you have a mental health professional that's an ally.
Right.
But that reconnecting again is pleasurable. It's pleasurable. you know? So how do we get past the fear of pleasure? That's a big one too. I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
seriously. Yeah. So the other answer to this, I want to say, is this is part of the discovery. It's discoverable. So um, this is the exciting part of what is it like to have, like my book is called The Nature Embedded Mind, right? What is it like to live with a nature embedded mind? We don't know.
Hmm.
We have to discover it together. This isn't about going backward in time. It's not about going to live in caves or whatever the heck people think. Our ancestors, we're not going backward. We're staying where we are with technology, with, like you said, big cities where our nervous systems are so overloaded that we're basically jangling around our lives, just trying to figure out how to downregulate, you know, um, to stay with what's here, the technology and everything that we've created, but reconnect. And then as we do that, together we learn. We learn, what does it mean, to be um, embodied again at this moment in time. And yeah, expanding our wisdom to include the wisdom of the rest of our family, our earth family. And then what do we know how to do? And what do we learn about healing our traumas? It's like the main piece that's missing is this reconnection. Like, I feel like we cannot talk about any of it until we have the courage to confront the distortions in our thinking, change them, which takes practice, just like any relationship. If you want to have a better relationship with your sister, your mother, your spouse, your whatever, you have to
Hmm.
spend time with them.
Right.
You have to connect with them. You have to listen, like you said that. And I think that's the biggest part, is that humans learning to listen, not jump to the conclusion of what do I think about it. Like, just listen.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big one. Biomimicry talks about this a lot. We call it quiet your cleverness.
Yeah.
Our feeling that we're clever, and therefore we always have a response, and so therefore we respond right away. And it's the idea of sitting and really listening. I love, and I think it's such an important point that you brought up, that I think I forget also to emphasize enough, because I live it and so I don't realize it, which is, this is not about going backwards. I
Mhm.
think that there is this mistaken idea that, as you said earlier, the tree hugger is the person that leaves everything and moves out of the city and goes to live in the middle of nowhere with, no running water and no technology. And there is so much of that. And I think that people mistake the difference between avoidance type of technological use, or which you could be anything, right? It doesn't even have to be technology, right? I could be completely disconnected from technology and still being in a trauma-based avoidance type of dangerous perspective, and a disconnection because I'm avoiding things, versus a fully connected person where, I spend, I mean, I've been working in the tech world. I started my career in the tech world, right? So I've been in the tech world since the very beginning, since we used to call it the internet bubble, because it was
Yeah.
just growing, since before things like YouTube and Facebook even existed. And I
Right.
have been sitting in front of a computer for most of my day since then. And I still consider myself an extremely connected person, because my relationships with the more than human world, with other kin, as well as with humans,
Mhm.
are extremely enriched, because to me, technology is not a disconnection mechanism, but on the contrary, I spend so much of my day like talking to my family, talking to my clients, talking to other people. Like, I use connection, everything that I've learned from the plant world, about what it means to create relationships of such a wide variety. And technology enhances my ability to do that. So
Mhm.
for me, reconnection has allowed me to create a healthy relationship with technology where I don't doom scroll like people talk about. But when I'm scrolling, I feel very present. Every Facebook group or inside of the naturally conscious community, we've made super tight
Mm.
connections where people travel. I have right in this moment two of my, of the people who met inside of the naturally conscious community, one of them who lives in the United States went to Italy, and then where, she's come here, and then she went to Germany where another person lives and who's part of the connect, because we know each other so well from the connections we've created. We talk,
Right.
we relate, we experience this whole natural world together, that it's quote unquote natural for them to say, well, if I'm traveling, of course I'm going to go stop by and say hello to you, because,
Right.
and we're going to be able to do this also in person and walk your land, which I feel like I know already. I know her horses. I know
Mhm.
how her land is laid out, because we talk about so much the experiences. So I think that what you said about the idea that this isn't about going backwards, but this is about discovering what it means to be fully connected in 2025 in a technological world, in a world that has, the built environment as well as this nature connection built into the built environment. I think is such an important point to emphasize for people who are, again, fearful of why would I use, like, I'm going to go to traditional therapy because I live in a city, so ecotherapy can't really help me, or forest therapy can't help me because I don't live near a forest. And it's like, no, that's not what we're talking about. It's so much more. It's
Right.
changes the way you perceive the world, so that you start to recognize again the nature everywhere, whether we're talking about the moss that's growing through the crack, or the dandelion that's in the corner, or even, the pocket park or the street tree, or any of these types of things, or the cat that's walking around. Like, it's
Right.
all nature.
Right. Right. And I think also, like, okay, there were two thoughts and they're running away from me, but one of them was, um, you know, just remembering that the original trauma is this separation.
Hmm.
That's the original trauma. So all the other traumas that we experience, I'm going to say probably all of them. If we sat down and made a list of all the traumas, I'm going to say it goes back to this original trauma of being artificially severed from reality. The reality is our bodies, our nature, are in nature, are connected. To work against that is hard, it's uncomfortable. That's what's scary. And then all traumas follow, because out of that trauma of my body knows it's connected, but my mind is saying, no, you're not. 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 It's like the fucking, oh, sorry, but
Oh,
ultimate,
you can say it all you want. I curse all the time.
it's
Please.
the ultimate gaslighting.
It is.
And so all traumas follow from that because we're off center, you know? So again, not minimizing all the traumas that we've all been through and need to heal from, but it's really repairing this that is the foundation. Everything else is like treating the symptom. It's putting a
Hmm.
band-aid. Your trauma is, your identifiable trauma is a reflection of this hidden trauma. Oh, this is what I wanted to say too. This is the kind of mindset, because you said, um, like, it's a perceptual shift. You know, it's the kind of a thing. It's not that easy to see, but once you see it, you can no longer unsee it.
Hmm.
And once you can't unsee it, your whole life changes. And it's more pleasant, it's more comfortable, it's less traumatic, it's less frightening. It's all the things that we're like looking outside. What's this thing that's causing all of this? It's like This is what's causing all of this.
Right.
And I also want to say, because, when I sent my book to beta readers and things, colleagues, clinicians, they were not happy with me. They were like, who are you to say this? And you're saying that the field of psychology is all wrong? And I'm like, yes. Yeah. Not all psychologies, but Western psychology, like, for one, there's other schools of psychology that aren't
Right.
Western. Let's remember that, but yeah, I mean, and so I kind of want to say, as a loving challenge to my peers, prove me wrong.
Right.
Let's heal this one and let's see. Am I wrong? I would love to be proven wrong, but I bet you I'm right. And I bet you everybody on some level who isn't defended, like I have to defend this idea, knows it's right. You get an intuitive hit, you get
Right.
an intuition. People, that's again where like this aha goes off, especially once you've ever gone on a invitation to connect and you're just like, oh, you know, and it happens every time. And I try my very best not to, you know, um, like lead them into thinking something. I'm like, it might be nothing. I don't know. It's all
Right.
okay. You might hear nothing. You might hear something. It doesn't matter. And that's actually true. Like, we want to meet everyone where they are in their relationship. Even if the relationship is so broken, that's fine. We need to know that. But just one experience of this starts to remind us of, again, what we knew when we were 1, 2, 3 years old. Many of us keep it, but a lot of us are trained away from this connection. And the
Yeah. And
ones that have the connection hide it. Well, I can't
mhm.
talk about that. I can't tell anyone. I can't tell anyone that I hear what the tree says to me. So that's another thing. When you get a group of people together and you start to hear, oh, everybody does that, more encouragement to be loud and to say, duh, of course. Of course I can feel what the rock is saying to me.
I'm so glad that you mentioned this last piece because it's another one of those points that I think is so important is just the same as we are nature, and nature is never alone, right? you
Mm,
you you don't have a spot where you see, even if you try to say something like this is the lone beaver or blah blah
mhm.
blah, it's not true, because the beaver is with the trees, with the ocean, with the water, with the this, with the what, like we just have this way of thinking about stuff that is different. And because of that, we do go through, I find so many people at the very beginning, inside the naturally conscious community, we say that we're weird and we're woo. And we say it because we're like, I want to be proud, because especially depending on where you grew up, what your generation was, who your parents were, type of thing. The idea of being weird and woo was bad. It was like,
Right.
stop talking about those things. You don't hear those things. Like, no, there are no kind of like that plant didn't whisper to you and stuff. And so when you do it in a group, and this is what I do love about the fact that, the combination of group activities, whether
Yes.
it's forest bathing and then one-on-one therapy, or like in my case, the naturally conscious community, as well as one-on-one, mentorship and coaching. I think that combination for me has always, especially because I live in the community, so I have to believe this. If not, I wouldn't live here. But it's
Right.
like, I think that that's the winning combination, because it is the group gives you a feeling of, oh my goodness, I'm really not alone. And it's so many different mirrors. So I always say, like you said earlier, you're not learning from me. You're learning from everybody, and everybody means every human, as well as every, other human type, more than human being.
Right.
And then the other piece is the one-on-one gives you the opportunity to really like dive deep into, hey, I was hearing this and this was coming up for me, and I realized that this is something, and blah 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 blah. And so it gives you that safe space to explore really deeply things that are, primarily connected to your personal experiences, and then the group to mirror off and to recognize yourself as a piece of everybody else. And I think I really see that combination as winning. And I like the fact that for your work, again, it's not the eco psychology in the tradition, in the way that I've heard it from some others, which is I take you in nature, blah, blah, blah. And it's still always a one-on-one relationship, but
Mm.
it's instead the group relationship, human and other kin, as well as the one-on-one, to give you that dual support that I
Mhm.
think is so important as necessary. There's of course a million and one other questions that I could have, but as we start to wrap things up, I'd
Mm.
really love for you to talk a little bit more about like the title of your book,
Mm.
where, kind of give people a little bit of a synopsis of your book, and also, where do they find it? Because I do think that this is a very different way of approaching the psychology side of it, and really looking at especially kind of brain science in a whole different way, and the way the cognitive sciences in a way that honestly we're just emerging. We're just getting really into it right now.
Right, right. Yeah. So the title of the book, the full title, is The Nature Embedded Mind: How the Way We Think Can Heal Our Planet and Ourselves. And the cover, I have to put a shout out to the artist that designed the cover with me, Alejandra Torres. We spent so much time together just really getting this image of
Mhm.
this human connected with, in the cover, very particular plants, insects. They're from particular like geographical locations that I felt important to include in this, um, this visual.
Right.
Um, the book is available anywhere, really. So you can Amazon, if you're okay with Amazon. A lot of people are not. Um,
Bookshop.org, folks.
exactly.
Bookshop.org.
Bookshop.org. And
I'll put a link.
yeah, and indie books, and you could go to my website. I can, if you want a signed copy, I'm happy to mail that out. It's the book, I designed it so that it's hopefully a really fun read. It's got anecdote, it's got my sense of humor, it's got science in it, it's got a reflection of my journey to becoming a guide, like from my journal while I was there. So it's very like,
So there
what
might
the
be cursing, folks. There might be cursing.
I think the only curse word I left in was shite, which in America isn't. So,
No.
but yeah. So let's see what else. Yeah, it's just an introduction to this concept, and hopefully again it's like a very warm, soft, engaging introduction. There are prompts. If like I have said in the book, it's best to take the book out of doors. So
Right.
find your other than human allies or your spot, and bring anything that comes up to them. So it's got some prompts like that. Um, but it's really an introduction to the practice. So like anything, reading the book isn't going to create this shift. The shift is created in the experiences. And
Mhm.
so it is advised, you can find someone like that knows how to take people in and reconnect in those sensory ways. Or I have a company that I co-founded with Julia DeConeva. The two of us have, it's called Elemental. If you Google search it, it's experience.
Oh, we'll put it all in the show notes. I
Okay,
got it up
cool.
right in front of me.
Excellent. Yeah. And that is a place where we do retreats, and we're going to have a book study group. So I'm really excited about that, so that we can take each chapter and in real time say, what is this? This is again
Nice.
where it becomes a collective, really breaking this artificial hierarchy. I don't have the answers any more than anybody. We're looking at this together. What does it stir in you? What does your wisdom tell you about this? And then of course, what are the other than humans' wisdom say about this? So the practice is really where someone will be able to make this shift. Um, Again, a serious plug for ANFT. There are guides all over the world. So if
Right.
you want to experience that particular style, if not from me, they're everywhere, and you can, log on and they have a list of all of their certified guides. Um, I think that's about the book, unless there was anything I
No,
didn't.
I think that that's great. I think that's wonderful, and we'll definitely I'll make sure that I put everything into the show notes, so we'll have a link to your website, we'll have a link to the book, we'll have a link to all the different aspects. I do love that you're going to do a kind of book club type perspective. We have the Plant Wisdom Book Club, and it has fundamentally shifted how we read each one of the books because, just the conversations, each one of us pick up on aspects that are different. And so sharing them, there's such a richness. So I love the idea that you're going to go kind of chapter by chapter, because it also encourages people to do the practices, to
Right.
experiment with it, to play. And again, that safe environment that says, hey, it doesn't really matter what answers you get or what you experience. The important thing is just having the experience. So
Right.
Julie, this has been fantastic. I mean, I'm so glad that we had this conversation, and I feel like there's so many pieces in here. Like I said, I'll make sure everything is in the show notes. I am just excited that there are people like who are in these fields like you that are going out and being so vocal. I know that myself, as somebody who reads a lot of papers in the neuroscience, especially, and some others, it's there's still a hard road. Like there's more coming out about awe and wonder and the beautiful aspects of it. And I think that there is a little bit of a shift, but in the cognitive sciences, I just went to a conference a few months back in Padova that was actually in the University of Padova, but in the School of Psychology. And
Mm.
it's all around plant facts and the plant mind. And so there is more coming out, but we need every single little ounce of voice out there to help keep people understanding that this trauma that we all kind of collectively experience, we also can collectively heal. And so thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And everybody who's listening, if you are looking for more resources, please reach out to Julie, check out her book, check out all the information. And of course, the ANFT, which foundation, it's not really a foundation, like you said, organization is a great one
Organization.
for forest therapy, as well as come into the naturally conscious community and have these experiences. The most important thing is to remember you're never alone, and you don't have to do this alone. Like, let's all help each other heal this collective trauma. So
Beautiful.
that's it for me, and that's it for us. So thank you so much. Remember always to resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. To continue these conversations, join us in the Naturally Conscious community, your premier online ecosystem for plant reawakening and accelerated evolution and co-creation with other kin. Here, you'll find expansive discussions, interactive courses, live events, and supportive group programs like the Plant Wisdom Book Club and the Sprouts Writing and Creativity Group. Connect with like-minded individuals collaborating with plants to integrate these insights into life. Intro and outro music by Steve Shuley and Poinsettia from The Singing Life of Plants. That's it for me, Tigria Gardenia, and my plant collaborators. Until next time, remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. I'm out. Bye.